Good morning, everybody from Berlin.
Good morning. And wow, what an amazing start we had yesterday. We had over 350 leaders from around the world join us throughout the day for the morning plenary, for the various roundtables, action roundtables. And we were able to cover topics ranging from how companies can move faster towards carbon neutrality, how we can travel more sustainably in the future, and other really important issues that we're all facing currently. I think we made really good progress in just one day. So are we ready for day two?
Absolutely. And today is the second day of We Merge Week. We want to celebrate innovators, entrepreneurs, and we want to explore what needs to take place, what are the preconditions for innovation and innovative problem solving in times of crisis to really work out. You know, we want to look at the entrepreneurial journey. We want to look at what are really sort of what helps us that innovation actually works out. Why is this important? Because it's obvious, right? In times of volatility, innovators help us to navigate, they help us to pivot, they help us to actually put forward these new solutions. And I'm sure, like us, you have your favorite stories from the last month of innovators and pivots that are taking place, whether it's the vodka manufacturer that within a couple of days actually switches to carbon neutral hand sanitizer production because there was shortage of it, or whether it was your local government that actually opened up and set up an open innovation process involving citizens into sort of some of the really tough problems that they were trying to look at. Or whether you were just looking at the McDonald's chains that had to close and that instead of sending their people home would actually give them the chance to work at the grocery shops of Aldi because they were overwhelmed by the amount of people running inside and buying toilet paper. So different people and sort of different institutions found really interesting ways to sort of pivot fast, to develop new ways of actually helping us in this really difficult time.
And obviously, with so many areas being affected by the impacts of COVID, as the different examples just have shown, we also went out to ask people, and we engaged a couple of hundred CEOs, thought leaders across the world, and we wanted to find out what are the key areas that need innovation right now. And there were 5 core themes that came up. The first area that does need innovation right now is probably the most obvious. This is around digitizing further on the products and services. And obviously with social distancing and with other aspects coming into place, a lot of our whole economy switched to online overnight. So this is one of the core areas that pretty much everybody responded as a need, even the companies who are already pretty advanced in that. The second point that came up, and that was interestingly a close second, was actually the need to innovate around a carbon neutral economy. And that is really top of mind right now. And I think as we discussed yesterday already, and that just shows that urgency mindset that was created around this feeling of we're all in this together and it's not just a health crisis we're facing. So there's a big need for innovation. And I think that's also one of those areas where it really needs a lot of creativity, and a lot of solutions are not created yet, but there is a desire to get there. The solutions, the final picture is there, but how do we get there? And then the third need that we identified was around supply chains. There was obviously a big disruption in terms of global supply chains. So now a lot of organizations are rethinking on how they really structure their supply chains, whether they localize them more or find other ways of dealing with supply chains. The fourth point was around the future of work. So of course, this is also one topic that probably everybody who's listening in right now has experienced in one way or the other. And the future of work is obviously not a topic that we just started to discuss, but through the impacts of COVID and a lot of the workforces all of a sudden working from home, This has brought new realities, but also, again, new opportunities for innovation in terms of how do we actually train people in the future and in what, and how do we enable teams to innovate and to collaborate in the digital world. And then the last point for innovation that we identified was around getting better consumer insights. So how do we use data best? Because right now we've seen a lot of changing trends in consumer behavior. Consumers are more thinking more about how they spend their money and on what. And so there's a big need to be closer to the market and to innovate around consumer insights. And I think what all of those needs show us is that, in order for a pivot or an innovation to be successful, it really needs to be aligned with the trends that we're seeing, be it social distancing, be it the remote work, be it the change in consumer mindsets, and all of those need to be taken into account to create pivots as successful as you have shared them.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Katherin. So during the WeEmerge initiative and these months of exploring these questions with leaders from all over, we didn't only ask about what are the biggest pain points and where do you see the biggest need for innovation. We also tried to explore when does innovation actually happen best now in times of crisis and what are the preconditions. And we want to share 4 points with you this morning. So the first one is, if you're really interested and care about innovators and care about innovation, you're supporting startups and SMEs right now. All of us know that about 80 to 90% of our economies, pretty much all over the world, consist of small-scale enterprises. And they're obviously the ones that are hurting the most right now. They're the ones that are sort of, on the one hand, have least financial stability and highest volatility in terms of their business models. So they're really struggling. Yes, they are more agile and they're quicker in changing their business models. But if you are really thinking about where do I get the innovation that I need right now, then we've seen that large organizations, no matter whether public or private, that were able to tap into the innovation power of startups, of SMEs this year, were really the ones that were winning. And this is something that is not just about money we've seen, right? Obviously, SMEs and startups right now need financial support, but they also need to have the partnerships and the collaboration and the professional advice of how to deal with a crisis, and not only how to pivot fast, but in which direction to pivot. So if you're thinking about where do I get new solutions, new answers to really tough questions, look for your local startup and SME ecosystem and tap into that.
And I think that perfectly also fits with the second point of advice in terms of how to make innovation work. And that's a fact that's, I think, actually known for quite a while by now, but it's still very often neglected. And that is that innovation is driven by diversity. And I don't just mean diversity in terms of age, gender, and so on, but also diversity in terms of viewpoints, training, social background, and so on. Obviously collaborating with startups, with SMEs, but also with other ecosystem players, larger NGOs, or if you want to stay a little more internal, to get together teams from across different divisions of different hierarchy levels and so on, is really key to drive innovation. And I think the one good news here is that we've seen that throughout Corona or the Corona crisis, that there has really been an enhanced or a heightened interest in opening up, in forming these new partnerships, and really collaborating, because again, people start to really see that we're connected, we're all in this together, and we need to collaborate differently to come up with the solutions that we need to drive us into a better future.
And just to reiterate that one of the things that I've heard repeatedly said by senior leaders is that one thing they surprised them most this year is how the crisis led to unusual suspects teaming up. And I think when we look at the complexity of the problems that we're all trying to save, we need that sort of teaming up of unusual suspects, of reaching out across divisions and really building these ecosystems. A third point that we wanted to talk about might sound extremely familiar to you. It's that some people, or a lot of people in our interviews and the research we're talking about, well, actually, we're right now doing really well in the crisis. We're solving the problems, and stuff that usually takes a long while can now happen really quickly. Within 2 weeks, we managed to actually sort of start PPE production of masks and other support systems that our governments were asking us to help them out with, right? And when we dug a little deeper and we asked, what's the point behind all of this? What we arrived at was that there is a burning platform, that there is a need and an urgency that everybody who's involved actually understands and is aligned with. And this is something that sort of is a point that leaders understand, and where now the question is, A, how can we actually leverage on this? How, if we have a joint understanding, if there's a burning platform, how do we make use of it? And how do we take this concept of a joint understanding of what the problem is and why we need to take action into our day-to-day outside of the immediate crisis?
Which is super important, because obviously we can't stay in that urgency mindset all the time, but yet we need to stay innovative. And there's one underlying factor that I want to bring in as the last point, which is around psychological safety. What does that mean? Even before Corona hit, we had the first initial studies coming out of Google, for example, when they tried to find out what's the one factor that makes our teams collaborate better, be more innovative, be more efficient. And what they found was exactly that, psychological safety. And this has by now been proven across other studies and across other sectors as well, is that if leaders succeed in not only bringing diverse teams together, but also creating a safe space where people feel like they're okay to fail, because that's part of innovation. So they can contribute, they can fail. It's a big learning process. And also where everybody gets equal amount of weight, so to say, so equal speaking times, equal contribution times. Those are factors that will contribute to making a team more innovative. And so that's why I think that's an underlying concept that is useful for all the previous points we have mentioned, and therefore it's super important to keep in mind.
So we hope those points made you a bit of an appetite for day 2 of We Merge Week, because today it is all about celebrating innovation and innovators and sharing what works. And we have an incredible variety of action roundtables, small working sessions, ranging from how do we now move from an industrial to a digital economy by becoming greener, but also how do we look at social impact? How do we look at the employee experience of the future? And what culture change do we require in order to get there? If you're still excited about joining the one or the other roundtable, they're almost at capacity, but jump to the website, take a look, and maybe you'll manage to sneak into one or the other roundtable, and we hope to see you there.
But before we go there, there's 2 more things. We have a great conversation with Verena Pausder, who is a serial entrepreneur, who is an innovator and also an author and investor here in Germany. And we've talked to her about her experience and her thoughts around innovation and entrepreneurship. And then afterwards, we will again take you through a very concrete approach of how you can start with your innovation journey. So I'm super excited for the conversation with Verena. Let's take it away.
Verena, thank you so much that you're with us at We Merge Week. Good morning. And I have to get started by congratulating you. You just published your first book in German, Das Neue Land. And it's an immediate success. 1 week out, it was a bestseller. That's the book. So for those of you who speak German, have a look, it's incredible. What's your sense right now? How does it feel with this just being out?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a strange feeling. I wouldn't have expected a book to be so different from what I've been doing before, because I've published a lot of articles, I've done a lot of initiatives, and I thought, okay, and this book is just another initiative. And somehow a book gets people in a different way. They feel that they're now part of something. They have to join. They have to, maybe move and do things quicker. So it had a real impact on my life because I'm getting lots of feedback and lots of great ideas. And now I have to kind of bundle them to make something out of it.
Fantastic. And we'll talk about the movement and what comes next in a little bit. But the reason why it's so great and so topical is that what we're trying to find out this week is, of course, what do we need to do to emerge stronger from the crisis, from the health, the economic, the environmental crisis? And you're arguing that, the new country is already here. So what do we have to do differently from now on?
I think in the past, before Corona, there was always a good reason to keep things we were used to because we're in a very secure, safe country. Yeah, so there's always a good argument to say we're doing a lot of things right, and we have a lot of wealth accumulated and everything. And I think this crisis now showed us that we might be good at doing the things of the past in a good way, but we're not so good at jumping onto the new topics of the future, such as education, digitalization, equal chances. And I think this is now the time to not waste our energy in rebuilding the old country, but kind of focusing on now really building things new. And so I think what we can all do now is seriously implement and actually put things into action and stop just talking about them.
And you're an example of that. You're a super successful entrepreneur. You support kids to think about, entrepreneurship and startups. You're steeped in the Berlin startup scene. Now, a lot of startups around the world, SMEs, are really suffering. They're the ones who are sort of basically toppling over first from the economic impact. What would be sort of your recommendation and advice on the one hand now thinking about how do I survive, and on the other hand, how can I think about pivoting and new innovation?
I think Michelle Obama said once, when they go low, we go high. And I think this is what entrepreneurs do. It's not the end of the world if a business in the way you planned it doesn't work out. Entrepreneurs call it pivoting. They do that even in good times. And I think it's now the time that much more people join this entrepreneurial force in the sense of what solutions are there, what problems do we have, how can we solve them? And if the business you have been currently doing wasn't the one to survive the crisis because maybe it was still too young or underfinanced, or it got hit by Corona in a sense that it was in travel or hospitality, then I think this is just one little step which now may have gone wrong, but that doesn't mean that we should give up the general big goal of creating the future together. And so I would say keep going. Failures are part of success, and Corona is like a big unknown for everyone, where you can't say, okay, I wasn't a good entrepreneur, but no, now I'm not going to give up just due to Corona.
Yeah, and somebody that I spoke to yesterday said, it's almost, Corona is almost like an accelerator. Everything that we talked about 2030 is happening today, and you described sort of some really practical ways that we could react to that in the book. Now this idea of using this really difficult situation to come out of it in a way that we are more sustainable as an economy, that we are more values driven. At the same time, we're also creating innovation in Europe. What are sort of the 1, 2, 3 sort of practical sort of topics that you think really need to be pushed forward now, either from politics or from the business sector? So I think one thing which has to be pushed forward is we need larger funds, because if we want to drive innovation is expensive, and especially if you want to finance the growth all the way. And we have to keep innovation, and especially digital innovation, in Europe. It can't be that we're financing the early stage, very risky phases, and once the companies get proven champions, they get sold off to non-European investors. So this is one thing. And in Corona times, we were suddenly able to come up with a matching fund.
in the sense of helping businesses to survive Corona, but why not have that same matching fund to help them scale? So that's one thing. The second thing is we need a Ministry of Digitalization, ideally on the European level, to say, how are we going to tax the tech firms? How are we going to implement our data protection? How are we going to host our services on European servers? So all the big questions we have to solve in terms of digitalization have to be ideally solved at a European level, but also have to be kind of reflected on a national level. So also Germany needs a digital ministry to kind of drive these things forward. And the third thing is education. Our schools were so badly prepared for this Corona crisis, and we all knew that. And now it's the time to act and to kind of sit at a table in our federal country and not do 16 or 17 times the same thing, but do it once and right. And there I'm talking about the infrastructure part, like the content part can still be very federal, but the other things have to be discussed on a national level.
Yeah, and when you talk about the need to digitize now further, and probably we're talking Europe, but this is obviously a global issue. And on the other hand, yesterday somebody in a WeMerge we talked about we need a climate ministry or somebody who's responsible for climate. So looking at the climate emergency, this discussion between growth and sort of a different, more innovative kind of growth, and at the same time looking at the boundaries of the planet, is that for you a contradiction, or where are the sweet spots?
I think it's really important to not say that both is possible with the same measures. So for example, a price for CO2 will obviously not lead to companies coming out of the crisis easily because that means that their production or their products get more expensive. So you can't directions, and climate change and climate protection is the number one topic, and it should be woven into things. So I came up in my book with a new company form, like what would you call it? Like a new entity. Yeah. Where sustainability is part of the DNA of this entity. So you can show to the outside, I'm not only offsetting my CO2, I'm reducing it. It's visible in the reports. I'm letting the employees participate in my company, and I'm taking a certain volume of donations every year to give to nonprofits in that sector. And I think these are the things which we have to think. How can we think economy and sustainability together? Because otherwise they will go against each other. The more we scale, the more we grow, the little we care for our planet. Yeah.
And if we translate that, dealing with complexity in a way into sort of the educational system for a moment, and you've been doing tremendous work with kids, but I think it equally holds true for adults to a certain extent. So, what do you think we need to learn or think about right now when we look at our kids or when we look at our colleagues in order for all of us to actually deal with this complexity successfully?
I think we've been all talking about lifelong learning so much, but we haven't really started it. Mainly we're just in the evening, it's like, thank God the day is over, let's watch Netflix. And that's human, yeah? I feel the same. We have 4 kids, and in the evening, the last thing I think is, okay, let's do an AI course. But because that can't be always pushed out to private life in the sense of maybe somebody will then do it, we also have to have it as part of our lives. And part of our lives means in the schools and with our employers. And there has to kind of be a certain time budget per month and per year where employees can really life learn what is next, because it will be very difficult to keep democracy stable and future-driven if we don't take people on this way with us and tell them what is this digital future about, what's your role in it, and how can you have a look behind the scenes.
Verena, thank you so much. And maybe let me close with the last question. I know you're an optimist, and I know you're discussing about what's currently going on with your kids and friends. And what's your message, or what gives you hope, or how would you sort of react to them within this really difficult situation, how to say, let's let's move forward, and there is bits that can really help us to build forward also.
I think everything what we became aware of in this crisis would have happened anyway. So it wouldn't have been, oh, if Corona hadn't hit us, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would have been in this situation anyway. And now it's a very condensed situation, but that helps us now. It's like, in Germany, there's a saying, lieber ein Ende mit Schrecken als ein Schrecken ohne Ende, which means we would have had to go through this transformation process for years and years, and politics wouldn't have reacted as courageously, and the population wouldn't have thought, okay, we have to do something. And so it would have been very tiring. And now it's very exhausting, but it kind of kickstarts us into the future right now, because we just have to now take the right decisions, and we can just see what went wrong in the past. And so my message is, this might be tough, but we condensed the toughness, and it wouldn't have been avoidable. So let's make the best out of it.
Thank you so much. And, I can't let you leave. I realized the book, I think, has so much practical, pragmatic ideas in it. Do you already know what's next? What are you going to do with it? All the feedback that you're getting, all the ideas?
I think what I'm going to do is extract the ideas, put them on a website with kind of a status bar, and say, so let's form the right teams around every idea, and then let's track the progress so everyone sees that we're actually moving into the right direction.
That sounds incredible. Verena, congrats again, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Florian.
Bye.
Bye.
There were a lot of super interesting points in this, obviously. One that stuck with me, because it also relates to what I want to do with you now, is the aspect of lifelong learning. And I think for innovation, there is an aspect of learning, because there are concrete skills and tools and mindsets that we covered yesterday that you can learn, and that you can train, and that you can build your muscle, so to say, to actually be more innovative and to approach challenges in a different way. And here at the Do School, we have developed our own innovation method for the past couple of years. We've been using it in all sorts of challenges, and usually in a co-creation process to create new answers, new solutions. And I want to introduce you to that method, because it's a super straightforward process, actually, that can help you structure and to get unstuck as well. Because often what happens along the way of creating something new is you hit certain roadblocks, it doesn't work out as you thought in the beginning, and then the idea fades away. And that's something that we want to give you a concrete way to avoid, basically. So let's dive into it. The Do School method is structured into 4 phases: dream, focus, plan, and do. And when you approach a challenge, or when you want to solve a problem, when you want to come up with new ideas, what we mentioned earlier as well, and that's also true when you use the Do School innovation method, ideally, don't just do it by yourself. Ideally, get a diverse team together so that you can really bounce off ideas, that you can really go through this iterative process. Because that is one aspect of the method, is it's very iterative, because it's not that you see a problem and you jump to the solution and right away you will know that that's the solution that's really going to work. That's not how it's going to work. So let's see how you can actually approach it. Let's get started with the dream phase, which is the first of the 4 phases. The dream phase covers 3 major aspects. The first one is what we call problem understanding. Before you can jump to any solutions, you need to dig deeper into the problem. There's various tools that you can use, starting from a problem tree, going into a systems map, and other things that you can do to understand much better, not only the problem, but also all the pieces, the stakeholders, and the interlinkages to that problem or challenge that you're trying to solve. And I'll give you one concrete tool in just a second that we'll do together to see how you can get started there. But before that, I want to mention that the two other parts of dream phase are the self-understanding. So problem understanding first, self-understanding second. Why do I talk about self-understanding? Well, one core bit that we have found super relevant for a successful innovation is actually the individual passion and purpose alignment. Because when you create ideas and when you take forward ideas that are not only good for others, but also resonate and align with your own passion and purpose, you will be better at implementing, you will be more resilient, you will be more motivated, and you will be more willing to actually go the extra mile to make it happen. So that self-understanding, that reflection on your passion and purpose is key as well. And then thirdly, it's of course ideation. And in the dream phase, we usually talk about creating lots of ideas. So get some diverse people together and use some cool brainstorming tools to get your juices flowing. So let's briefly jump back to what I mentioned first, the problem understanding. I want to show you one tool of how you can approach problem understanding with yourself, or in real life, you can also do it with another person. And you can use that tool, which we call the 5 whys, in any setting, basically. You can do it on a piece of paper. You can download the tool right now to use it. We're showing it here, but you can also do it in a conversation with another person. So if you're up for it, I invite you to actually play along and go along on this exercise with us super briefly, to just see what comes up and how it feels. Because sometimes it does feel, wow, this is super simple. What will that actually do? But once you have done it the first time, you will realize how powerful this can be. So the 5 whys, as simple as its title, it's asking why 5 times. And by doing that, you'll uncover things that aren't as present in the beginning. So if you want to play along, then get started and note down, why did you join We Emerge Week this morning? And just note your answer. You can do it in the tool here, or you can also do it just on a piece of paper, or just in your mind. So just take a minute to think about, why did you decide to join our session this morning? And here in our example, you can see that we said, well, we want to be inspired by entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators. Okay, so when you have your answer, then my question is just, well, why? Why did you want to be inspired? Or whatever else you have noted for yourself. So again, you can take a moment. You can also do that with somebody else in a conversation. That's usually actually the nicest, because it really helps you uncover new things about colleagues, or maybe about people you're just getting to know right now, or you uncover new bits of a problem. So why did you want to be inspired? Well, in our case, we say we want to find out how to respond to challenges in my position and organization. Well, why is that? Why do you need to find out how to respond to challenges? And again, just take a few seconds to note your own answer. And if it's too early, or if you're not in the mindset to do it right now, then, just download the tool and you can do it at any other time. And again, we said, well, I want to learn how to be more resilient and change in uncertainty. Well, why is that? And as you see, we're going along, new layers uncover. And that's what I talked about in the beginning, right? So now we're getting deeper into the actual why. So I've seen that this was a big challenge for me in the past months. Well, why was that? And now you're starting to get to what we also might call a root cause of a problem. And maybe sometimes you even need to ask why a little more often, but definitely it will lead you to answers, be it self-discovery or be it discovery around a problem. And so in the last instance here, we find out that the person answering wants to show up as their best self in their team and personal life, and it's been hard for them recently. which is a lot more profound than the initial answer. And we tend to be not as profound, obviously, when we give our first answer. So when you want to find out about a problem or about a person or about a question in general, you can use 5 whys at any time. That's just one simple tool. But as mentioned, in the dream phase, also go beyond, of course, just this, go into systems mapping, go into really understanding the problem and understanding your own passion and purpose, and that of team members as well. And then get ideating. And then we're moving into the focus phase. So focus phase is all about user understanding. And that's really core, because here we're going into this iterative process, and we're very much open at that point still. Even though you did an initial brainstorming, you have maybe your first 20 ideas that sound really exciting. The focus phase is really about understanding what your user, what your customer, what your beneficiary wants, and how that resonates with the ideas that you have already created. So in the focus phase, the first thing you want to do is create interaction with your customers, with your users, with your beneficiaries. You can do that in various different ways. You can run surveys, you can do focus groups, and other tools that are helpful to understand. You can also go into early stage prototyping already, which doesn't mean you have to prototype a full idea, but maybe just some aspects to put out there quickly to get feedback from your users, from your customers, to know what's resonating, what kind of feedback am I getting. And the most important here is don't just ask them, do you like this, yes or no? It's a common mistake that's being made when interacting with users. It's more important to be much more open, giving them something and just waiting for their reactions to see how they engage with it, and so on. So those are a couple of things to approach user understanding. And the key is every time you learn something, bring it back, reflect, and iterate your ideas based on it. And by that, also slowly start to select the most promising ideas or idea. And I want to show you one more tool super briefly, and that's the empathy map. So this is one way when ideally you do this actually by interviewing a couple of your consumers, of your beneficiaries, and bring that information together. But if you don't have the capacity to do that, you can, at the minimum, really try to put yourself into the shoes of that person and to think from their perspective. And the empathy map is about building empathy, stepping into the shoes of somebody else, either by asking them or by imagining them, or by observing them. That's another method to do that. So if you want to find out a customer experience, you can also go along and observe how they're doing it. And you can take note in an empathy map like that, where you really want to think about their whole world. So what are they feeling? What are they seeing? What are they thinking, hearing, and doing? And by filling this map, this will give you really good grounding in understanding what is needed. Out of that, you can create a value proposition. Out of that, you can talk about how you can maybe release some of the pain points or provide some gains for that person. And again, that will drive your idea forward. Obviously, once you have selected finally the one idea that you want to take forward, you will go then into the plan and the do phase. And here it's super important in the plan phase to really start thinking about the impact that you want to create, to then also be able to make a clear plan how to get from now to creating that impact and how to measure your progress along the way. A lot is here also about resources, and I'm not just talking about money. I think we're also coming back to mindsets from yesterday, like when you think in abundance mindset, what are all the resources you have to make this happen? And think really broad and diverse again. And then obviously the do phase, here it's for us in an innovation cycle. Even in the do phase, you are still in an iterative process. So create an MVP, get it out there, get it tested, get your feedbacks in, and continue the process. So this is our 4-stage Do School innovation method, and I've just shown you some very concrete tools out of it. There's obviously a multitude of them, but I hope that those have sparked some ideas how you can approach your next innovation challenge. And yeah, I just wish you a great second day of re:Merge Week. Hope to see you in some of our action roundtables later, and have a great day, everybody.